mechanical iceberg.
Physics of possibility.
Quantum mechanics allows supreme mind.
The brain is capable of millions of neural nets.
Cascade of biochemical
an emotional response.
molecules.
The brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers.
We are running the holodeck.
Whatever way we observe the world around us.
So how can you continue to see the world as real if the self that is determining it to be real is intangible? Are all realities existing simultaneously? Is there a possibility that all potentials exist side by side? Have you ever seen yourself through the eyes of someone else that you have become? And looked at yourself through the eyes of the ultimate observer?
Who are we? Where do we come from? What should we do? And where are we going?
Why are we here? Well, that is the ultimate question, isn't it?
What is reality?
What I thought was unreal now, for me, seems in some ways to be more real than what I think to be real, which seems now more to be unreal.
You can't explain it. And anybody who gets too lost and anybody who spends too much time trying to explain it is likely to get lost forever down the rabbit hole of mysteriousness.
I think the more you look at quantum physics, the more mysterious and wondrous it becomes.
Quantum physics, in very succinctly speaking, is a physics of possibilities.
These are questions. These are addressing questions of how the world feels to us, of whether there's a difference between the way the world feels to us and the way it really is.
Have you ever thought about what thoughts are made of?
I think some of the things we're seeing with the children today is a sign that the culture is in the wrong paradigm and not appreciating the power of thought.
Every age, every generation has its built-in assumptions that the world is flat, or that the world is round, etc. There are hundreds of hidden assumptions, things we take for granted that may or may not be true. Of course, in the vast majority of cases, historically, these things aren't true. So presumably, if history is any guide, much about what we take for granted about the world simply isn't true. But we're locked into these precepts without even knowing it oftentimes. That's a paradox.
Modern materialism strips people of the need to feel responsible. And often enough, so does religion. But I think if you take quantum mechanics seriously enough, it puts the responsibility squarely in your lap, and it doesn't give answers that are clear-cut and comforting. It says, yes, the world is a very big place, it's very mysterious, mechanism is not the answer, but I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, because you're old enough to decide for yourself.
Is everyone a mystery? Is everyone an enigma? They most certainly are.
Asking yourself these deeper questions opens up new ways of being in the world. It brings in a breath of fresh air. It makes life more joyful. The real trick to life is not to be in the know, but be in the mystery.
It's time to get wise.
Why do we keep recreating the same reality? Why do we keep having the same relationships? Why do we keep getting the same jobs over and over again? In this infinite sea of potentials that exist around us, how come we keep recreating the same realities? Isn't it amazing that we have options and potentials that exist, but we're unaware of them? Is it possible that we're so conditioned to our daily lives, so conditioned to the way we create our lives, that we buy the idea that we have no control at all? We've been conditioned to believe that the external world is more real than the internal world. This new model of science says just the opposite. It says what's happening within us will create what's happening outside of us.
There's a physical reality that is absolutely rock solid, and yet it only, if you want to put it this way, it only comes into existence when it bumps up against some other piece of physical reality. That other piece may be us, and of course we're partial to those moments. But it doesn't have to be either. It could be just some incidental rock comes flying along and interacts with this fuzzy mass of stuff, and sure enough, it provokes it into a particular state of existence.
And there were philosophers in the past that said, look, if I kick a rock and I hurt my toe, that's real. I feel that, it feels real, it's vivid, and that means that it's reality. But it's still an experience, and it's still this person's perception of it being real.
Scientific experiments have shown that if we take a person and hook their brains up to certain PET scans or computer technology and ask them to look at a certain object, and they watch certain areas of the brain light up, and then they've asked them to close their eyes and now imagine that same object. And when they imagine that same object, it produced the same areas of the brain to light up as if they were actually visually looking at it. So it caused scientists to back up and ask this question. So who sees then? Does the brain see? Or do the eyes see? And what is reality? Is reality what we're seeing with our brain? Or is reality what we're seeing with our eyes? And the truth is that the brain does not know the difference between what it sees in its environment and what it remembers, because the same specific neural nets are then firing. So then it asks the question, what is reality?
We're bombarded by huge amounts of information, and it's coming into our body, and we're processing it, coming in through our sense organs, and it's percolating up, and at each step we're eliminating information, and finally what is bubbling up to consciousness is the one that's the most self-serving.
The brain processes 400 billion bits of information a second, but we're only aware of 2,000 of those. But our awareness of those 2,000 bits of information are just about the environment, our body, and about time.
We're living in a world where all we see is the tip of the iceberg, the classical tip of an immense quantum mechanical iceberg.
Hey, wow! You got a lot of shots to develop?
No.
Oh, bummer. Well, I'll catch you later.
If the brain is processing 400 billion bits of information, and then our awareness is only on 2,000, that means reality is happening in the brain all the time. It's receiving that information, and yet we haven't integrated it.
The eyes are like the lens, but the tape that's really seeing is the back of the brain. It's called the visual cortex. It's right back here. It's like this camera, and it's tape. Did you know that the brain imprints what it has the ability to see? Now, this is important. For example, this camera is seeing a lot more around me than what is here, because it has no objection and no judgment. The only movie that's playing in the brain is what we have the ability to see. So is it possible our eyes, our cameras see more than what our brain has the ability to consciously project?
Well, the way our brain is wired up, we only see what we believe is possible. We match patterns that already exist within ourselves through conditioning. So a wonderful story that I believe is true is that when the Indians, the Native American Indians on the Caribbean islands, saw Columbus's ships approaching, they couldn't see them at all because it was so unlike anything they had ever seen before. They couldn't see it.
When Columbus's armada landed in the Caribbean, none of the natives were able to see the ships, even though they existed on the horizon. The reason that they never saw the ships was because they had no knowledge in their brains or no experience that clipper ships existed. So the shaman starts to notice that there's ripples out in the ocean, but he sees no ship, but he starts to wonder what's causing the effect. So every day he goes out and looks and looks and looks, and after a period of time, he's able to see the ships. And once he sees the ships, he tells everybody else that ships exist out there because everybody trusted and believed in him. They saw them also. We create reality. We're reality-producing machines. We create the effects of reality all the time.
We always perceive something after reflection in the mirror of memory.
As far as whether or not we're just living in a big holodeck or not, it's a question that we don't necessarily have a good answer to. I think this is a big philosophical problem that we have to deal with in terms of what science can say about our world, because we are always the observer in science. So we are still always constrained by what is ultimately coming into the human brain that allows us to see and perceive the things that we do. So it is conceivable that all of this really is just a great illusion that we have no way of really getting outside of to see what is really out there.
Your brain doesn't know the difference between what's taking place out there and what's taking place in here.
There is no out there, independent of what's going on in here.
You okay? I heard you scream earlier. Was it another dream? You were an Indian, watching Columbus's ship materialize out of thin air. Wow. And this medicine man kept hitting you. Cool. Hey, maybe it was a past life or a parallel reality or a future life.
That's weird.
Or maybe that dream was trying to tell you the truth. I guess it just depends on what you think is real. Maybe you should try different anxiety pills.
My pills are fine, okay? Thank you.
I have to go get dressed. I hope you feel better, Amanda.
God, Amanda, I could be such an asshole.
There actually are choices in the direction of how a life can go that are contingent upon small-level quantum effects not being washed out.
First of all, let's talk about the subatomic world, and then we'll talk about what it's telling us about reality. The first thing I want to tell you about the subatomic world is it's totally a fantasy created by mad physicists trying to figure out what the heck is going on when they do these little experiments. By little experiments, I mean big energy in little spaces and little pieces of time. It gets pretty nutty at that realm of things, and so subatomic physics was invented to try to figure that all out. We need a new science down there. It's called quantum physics, and it is subject to a whole range of debatable hypotheses, thoughts, feelings, intuitions as to what the heck is really going on.
Matter is not what we have long thought it to be. To the scientist, matter has always been thought of as sort of the ultimate in that which is static and predictable.
Within all the atoms and molecules, all the space within the particles take up an insignificant amount of the volume of an atom or molecule, the fundamental particles. The rest of it is vacuum.
What seems to happen is that particles appear and disappear all the time. So where do they go when they're not here? Now, that question is tricky. I'm going to give you two answers. Answer number one, they go into an alternative universe where the people in that universe are asking the same question about those particles when they come into our universe. They say, where do they go?
There's a great mystery called the mystery of the direction of time. There's a certain sense in which the fundamental laws of physics that we have don't make any interesting distinction, say, between past and future. For example, it's a puzzle from the standpoint of the fundamental laws of physics. Why we should be able to remember the past and not have the same kind of epistemic access to the future. It's a puzzle from the standpoint of these laws why we should think something like, by acting now, we can affect the future but not the past. These things, that we have a different kind of epistemic access to the past and the future, that we have a different kind of control by acting now over the future than we do over the past. These things are so fundamental to the way we experience the world that that it seems to me not to be curious about them is to be, 3/4 of the way to being dead.
Want to shoot some hoops? Now you don't have to be like that. Come on and play. Look, he likes you. Don't you have time for a little one-on-one? How long has it been since you played? Come on, you got the ball. Take a shot. No, my lady, not from there. It's out of bounds. Gotta be on the court to be in play. Welcome to Duke Reginald's court of unending possibilities. Gotta sink the last one.
For her.
never touched you.
Right.
And it's not solid. This ball is mostly empty.
In fact, the universe is mostly empty.
We like to think of space as empty and matter as solid. But in fact, there is essentially nothing to matter whatsoever. It's completely insubstantial. Take a look at an atom. We think of it as a kind of hard ball. Then we say, oh, well, no, not really. It's this little tiny point of really dense matter right at the center, surrounded by a kind of fluffy probability cloud of electrons popping in and out of existence. But then it turns out that that's not even right. Even the nucleus, which we think of as so dense, pops in and out of existence just as readily as the electrons do. The most solid thing you can say about all this insubstantial matter is that it's more like a thought. It's like a concentrated bit of information.
What makes up things are not more things, but what makes up things are ideas, concepts, information.
And like I said, it never touches. Those electrons build up a charge and push the other electrons away before they touch. So nobody touches nothing. Come on, put your stuff down. Nobody's gonna take it. Like I said, this is my court. It's no problem.